Hello and welcome to a new episode of Becco Movies, where we're talking about anything movies related, especially DC. So, the main issue I would like to talk about is basically the DCU, which is sometimes known as the Snyderverse. Obviously, there's a huge difference between the two concepts. Basically, the Snyderverse is, as a lot of DC fans know it as, is Man of Steel, which was the first movie that was directed by Zack Snyder, who was chosen by Christopher Nolan to direct this movie after he did the Dark Knight trilogy, because he saw his Watchmen and 300 movies and chose him as the leader in a way for the next DC franchise, because WB wanted to compete with Marvel. So basically, Snyder was chosen by Nolan, and that's a very important point to point out. So when he started making the Man of Steel movie, it was a little bit more darker than usual and a little bit more gritty. And a lot of people were used to the Christopher Reeve Superman and the Smallville Superman. So the more colorful, hopeful, optimistic, boring stuff. And Snyder wanted to present something different. And another important point to mention that this movie was written by Christopher Nolan and David Goyer, who wrote the Dark Knight trilogy. So basically, when people start complaining that this is too dark, I mean, think about it. It's David Goyer. What do you think he was going to write? Novels for children with comedies? And this was the first movie. And although it was a different start, and Henry Cavill was perfectly cast as the Man of Steel, the movie made crap loads of money. And it was a success. Even the merchandise sold like crazy. But again, because WB was being WB and they wanted to compete with Marvel, they rushed things and introduced Batman v Superman, which gave us the best live action Bruce Wayne and Batman to date, starring the one and only Ben Affleck, who was basically at the top of his game. He had already finished Argo, won an Oscar for it, for directing, and even he was starring in the movie. He also did Gone Girl, directed by David Fincher. He did The Accountant, which was directed by Gavin O'Connor. He also did The Town, which he directed himself, which is like an homage to Heat, which was a movie directed by Michael Mann. So again, as you can see, they were getting movie stars. And this is not to mention, of course, the supporting cast. I mean, and I've mentioned this before on Twitter, Jeremy Irons as Alfred, J.K. Simmons as Commissioner Gordon. Perfect casting. Perfect casting, especially for a Batman movie. Same thing with the supporting cast of Superman parents. I mean, come on, Kevin Costner, Diane Lane, Russell Crowe, all perfect casting. Joe Morton as father of Cyborg. Again, this is more and more examples of perfect casting for the Snyderverse, or the DCU as it was called at the time. So everything was going according to plan, and we're getting really good actors and good movie makers. And not just Snyder, we're getting David Ayer, who did the Suicide Squad, but his cut was butchered by WB because they wanted more comedy. We got the lady director who did Wonder Woman, and again, she did a really good job. The first movie made crap loads of money, almost close to $1 billion. Who would have thought that? James Wan, who was famous for his horror movies, and his first Aquaman movie made $1 billion. Who would have thought that an Aquaman movie would have made $1 billion? And the main reason it made $1 billion, not just because the ladies wanted to see Aquaman, Jason Momoa, but also because it was gaining momentum from the previous successful DCEU movies, which is Batman v Superman, which was epic because it had Batman and Superman. But again, because the movie was serious, some people and man children didn't like it. What can you do? This is life. But this is where everything started to basically go downhill. The studio started interfering with BVS, cut half an hour. Then you got obviously the Suicide Squad. As I mentioned, they cut God knows how long, at least 1 or 2 hours. And then we reached peak studio interference when they butchered Zack Snyder Justice League. And instead of 4 hours, we got mainly 2 hours, and at least half an hour of this was added by Joss Whedon, who treated the actors like crap, and that was horrible, basically. But still, the movie made money. Afterwards, when Snyder was put away after unfortunately having a family tragedy, he was kind of fired indirectly by the studio. They started what's called the Hamadaverse, which is, Blue Beetle, Birds of Prey, which was a horrible movie. Wonder Woman 84, again, horrible movie, all flops. The Suicide Squad by James Gunn, horrible flop. It lost at least 100 million. And let's not forget what I like to call the year of flops, which is, I think, 2023, where you had Shazam Part 2, Aquaman Part 2, The Flash, and also another movie, that Blue Beetle. Four movies that were huge flops, especially The Flash. It was a colossal flop, not just a flop. It's beyond a flop. But still, they continued and they wanted James Gunn, which started the. Yeah, let's not forget the Black Adam with the Rock, who tried bravely to reintroduce Henry Cavill as Superman, but again, that was mismanaged by the studio. And even after Cavill announced he's coming back, they said, "Nah, we're gonna try James Gunn." Was fired from Marvel, then hired by Disney for disgusting things he said in the past. Anyway, that's all online. And still, his Superman movie flopped. His Creature Commandos, his Peacemaker season 1 and 2. Nobody cared, nobody watched them. And the same thing, like I said, with the Suicide Squad, which was a flop. What I'm trying to say is the Snyderverse was a success. It was followed by the Hamadaverse, flopped. Black Adam was a brave attempt, but unfortunately it didn't make money. It wasn't even released in China. And the way that they treated Henry Cavill didn't help as well. And finally, the James Gunn universe, or Gunverse, whatever you want to call it, it is horrible, with disgusting things being said and showed in the TV shows and movies. So that's why the fans want the Snyderverse to be reinstated or restored, whatever you want to call it. It's not just about Zack Snyder. It's about the actors that Zack Snyder brought to DC and WB. Like I said, Ben Affleck, Henry Cavill, Jeremy Irons, J.K. Simmons. They were doing the right thing. And you could have had your comedy movies on the side. Nobody said no to Shazam or, Aquaman, which had a lot of comedy in it. So that's why we want the Snyderverse to be restored. Not just because it's much better quality. The merchandise sold like crazy. Even the video games were better. The animated movies were much, much better. I mean, the DC animated universe, that's a whole different video. So why wouldn't we want better products? I don't understand. And forget about Snyder. Nobody's saying you should direct all the movies. Ben Affleck was going to direct his movie, or Gavin O'Connor. Christopher McQuarrie was going to direct Man of Steel 2. And even in the Snyderverse or DCU, whatever you want to call it, Aquaman and Wonder Woman and even Suicide Squad wasn't directed by Zack Snyder. And his effect on these movies were very limited anyway. Maybe using his stunt team or just make the movies connected, directing a few scenes here and there, like the Flash scene in Suicide Squad. So I don't understand why there's so much focus on one man. Whether you love him or hate him, it's just about getting better movies, better entertainment. And he was going to introduce the hopeful, optimistic Superman anyway. We all know that. Even Henry Cavill said that in an interview. I was going to introduce the hopeful, optimistic Superman. So what's the big deal about Snyder coming back? He's not going to direct all the movies. We saw what happened when one man directs all movies. And I'm talking about the X-Men universe with Fox, with Bryan Singer. He directed a lot of movies, and the last few ones were not that good, let's be honest. So let's see what happens if he comes back and the movies are a success. Okay, everyone's happy, and hopefully it'll be serious, but at the same time you'll have some light-hearted movies on the side, like I said, Shazam or Booster Gold, whatever. For me, the most important thing is Ben Affleck and Henry Cavill coming back. Maybe to a certain extent Gal Gadot, but these two have to come back. And hopefully Nolan will come back as well as a producer, because whether we like to believe it or not, these movies make money and it's a good paycheck for these actors. And if you've noticed, Hollywood is not doing that well. So let's see what happens. If he comes back, he comes back. If he doesn't, we'll see who's the next person who will take over when the new WB owners buy the studio and take effect, and see what happens. Becco movies out.